Hello and welcome everyone to the Party Animal Podcast, episode number 9, Partying and Drug Use. I'm Thomas.
And I'm Luna. It is a really vital and honestly a challenging topic we're tackling today. I'm ready to get into this material with you.
Absolutely. We've been handed a really significant stack of insights, a collection of collected intelligence, you could say. And it all centers around this critical and often tragic collision point. You have the high-energy world of celebration and nightlife on one side, and then the pervasive presence of substance use on the other.
That's right. And our mission here really is to give you, the listener, a way to be genuinely well-informed without having to sort through everything yourself.
For shortcut, almost.
Exactly. We want to pull out the essential, crucial knowledge, do it quickly, but, do it thoroughly, without it becoming this overwhelming flood of information.
Yeah.
We're really going to focus on the real-world consequences, the mechanisms of danger, and the precautions everyone should understand, whether you're just going out for the night or you're actually the one organizing an event.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Before we jump into the cold data and the clinical risks, I think we have to start with the environment itself.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the setting, the psychological drivers behind it all, they play such a huge role in the temptation and ultimately the decisions people make.
Facts. The material we have, it starts by painting a picture. It introduces us to a young man named Nathan in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. His story is really our case study for understanding this whole dynamic.
Right, Nathan. He was just a young man like so many others who was just drawn in by the magnetic pull of the nightlife scene. The description we have is so vivid. He talks about a place where music, laughter, and excitement merged into a sensory explosion. It's that allure,
Yeah, I do.
That powerful promise of transcending the ordinary, that feeling that something spectacular is waiting just behind that warehouse door.
And that feeling is completely engineered.
Yeah.
The atmosphere that's described, it is incredibly effective at eroding your boundaries. Well, think about it. A dimly lit warehouse. It's probably far from main commercial areas. The air is thick with this pulsating, relentless music. All of that creates what the text calls an intoxicating atmosphere that seemed to promise an escape from the mundane.
That desire for escape, for a temporary break from routine or stress, that's the real catalyst here, isn't it?
It's a profound catalyst. And when you combine that feeling with low light, high sensory input, and a peer group that's already in that celebratory mindset, it becomes a very, very potent mix.
It absolutely does. And as Nathan's night went on, we see that familiar scenario that so many people run into. He gets to know a group who are, actively indulging in drugs.
You might not have even walked in looking for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the permissive and immediate nature of the environment just facilitates that exposure, puts it right in front of him.
And this is where we get into the core psychology of that decision. The information we have says Nathan was intrigued by the allure of altered states of consciousness, and he decided to take that leap, to join in. That moment, Thomas, that decision, it's curiosity mixed with pure acceptance and that overwhelming atmosphere. That's the turning point that can trap so many people.
And that takes us immediately from that promise of euphoria to Nathan's hard wake-up call, right? The jump from the intoxicating vibe to the very immediate and often destructive consequences is, it's startlingly fast.
It is. So let's detail the height of that experience, because understanding the drug's effects is key to understanding that rapid loss of control.
Okay.
Amid this swirling haze of smoke and rhythmic beats, the material tells us the drugs immediately distorted his perception, eroding his inhibitions and clouding his judgment.
That erosion of inhibition, I think that's the key mechanism of immediate danger.
It has to be.
When your judgment is compromised, you're basically operating outside of your own moral and safety parameters. You're making decisions that you would never even consider in a sober state.
Right. Whether that's taking more substances or getting behind the wheel of a car or other risky behaviors. The text is really clear that in that altered state, Nathan made decisions he would come to deeply regret.
It just shows the power these substances have over your rational mind.
And then comes the inevitable crash. The material really forces us to contrast that temporary thrill with the heavy, lingering consequences. As the night ended, the euphoria waned, leaving behind a trail of consequences.
And the immediate physical reality. That always hits the hardest, doesn't it?
Always. Nathan woke up the next morning feeling totally disconnected with a pounding headache and a sense of disorientation.
Mm.
And that physical and mental distress, that's the moment the realization really hits.
Mm.
He had taken these huge physical and mental risks without fully understanding the dangers or the long-term impact.
I really appreciate that this narrative doesn't just end with the regret and the hangover.
No, it goes deeper.
It details the essential steps he took next.
Yeah.
It focuses on the difficult path to recovery and introspection. He was overwhelmed by guilt and regret. But instead of hiding, or worse, self-medicating further, he actively sought support.
And that is the crucial life-saving move right there. He sought support from friends, family, and professionals.
It wasn't just a day of recovery.
Not at all. It was the start of a deep, difficult journey of introspection and healing. And that journey demanded a real commitment to change. That commitment is it's absolutely necessary for anyone trying to navigate these chaotic environments.
And through that process, through therapy and active self-education, he went through this fundamental shift in his understanding.
Right. He finally grasped the profound risks associated with drug use. He moved way beyond just the fear of getting caught.
And that holistic understanding of risk. That's really what we need to get across today. He connected the momentary rush to the profound potential for addiction, the detrimental, long-lasting impact on mental health.
And the possible harm to his relationships and his entire future. It's not just a medical problem in the moment. It's a life erosion problem over time.
So what does this all mean in the bigger picture? Nathan's experience didn't just end with his personal recovery. It transitioned directly into meaningful advocacy.
Yes, his journey inspired him to become a vocal advocate for safe and responsible enjoyment of nightlife. He started collaborating with local organizations, using his own story as a cautionary tale.
Providing resources and, maybe more importantly, just normalizing the idea of making informed choices.
Exactly. The ultimate goal, as the material stresses, was to promote a culture where fun and celebration could actually coexist with personal well-being and safety.
It's about not sacrificing your long-term self for a moment of escapism.
That's it. Perfectly put.
And that beautifully sets the stage for the next phase of our analysis, which is getting into the multifaceted risks of partying and drug use, pulling from all the comprehensive information we've gathered. We have to go beyond just the bullet points.
We do. We need to break these risks down logically by category. I think we should start with the most immediate and devastating, the adverse effects on physical health. What happens inside the body?
Okay, let's start with systemic damage. Let's get specific about the why. The material is very clear. Using illicit drugs, especially in these high-energy party environments, can have direct detrimental effects on physical health. It lists cardiovascular problems, respiratory issues, and organ damage.
Let's talk about the heart first. When you introduce stimulants like cocaine or certain synthetic cathinones, bath salts, into your system, your body floods with adrenaline and noradrenaline.
Which is basically your fight-or-flight response on overdrive.
Exactly. So that triggers acute hypertension, high blood pressure, a massively increased heart rate, and severe vasoconstriction, meaning your blood vessels tighten up.
Okay.
Now, you couple that with the physical exertion of dancing for hours and the almost inevitable dehydration you get in a crowded, warm venue, and you're putting an absolutely tremendous immediate strain on your cardiovascular system.
You're pushing it to its absolute limit.
To its limit, and that drastically increases the risk of a stroke, a heart attack, or an acute arrhythmia, even in young, otherwise healthy people.
That strain is often compounded by the next point, which is decreased inhibitions and increased risk-taking. The material says that lowered inhibitions facilitate more drug usage, which naturally leads to increased risk-taking behaviors, impaired judgment, and engagement in unsafe or risky activities.
It's a cascading failure, a domino effect. If you're already pushing your physical limits with stimulants, lower judgment means you might ignore signs of overheating or dehydration.
Or you might decide to try mixing substances.
Right, because your internal caution mechanism, that little voice in your head, it's switched off. That loss of judgment is where most people move from a recreational risk to genuine clinical danger.
And that leads directly to the most terrifying risk of all, the increased overdose risk. This is the life or death scenario that gets so much worse in these unsupervised party environments.
It does. The danger is heightened, especially when illicit drugs are combined with alcohol or other substances.
So the mixing.
Right. We call that synergy. And it is exponentially lethal. If you mix two depressants, say alcohol and an opioid, whether it's prescribed or illicit, They don't just add their effects together, they multiply them.
So it's not 1 + 1 = 2.
No, it's 1 + 1 = 10. The combination critically slows down the central nervous system, and the most common cause of death is respiratory depression. Your body literally forgets to breathe.
Wow.
This is particularly tragic right now, given the prevalence of fentanyl contamination in, well, in everything. Counterfeit prescription pills, cocaine. It means a normal expected dose can become lethal because of an unknown potency.
That fact alone, the unknown potency and the accidental mixture, that should be enough of a deterrent for anyone.
You would think so.
But then there's the issue of infectious diseases, which I think often gets overlooked when the focus is only on the immediate high or the fear of an overdose.
This is a consequence of communal use and compromised hygiene in chaotic settings. The information we have details the serious, lifelong risk of contracting bloodborne diseases like HIV/AIDS or hepatitis C.
It's not just about needles for intravenous use, right?
Not at all, and that's a crucial point. The risk extends through the sharing of other paraphernalia, like straws or rolled-up bills used for snorting.
How does that work?
Well, those acts can transfer microscopic amounts of blood if the nasal passages are irritated or have tiny cuts, which is a surprisingly common thing to happen during substance use.
So we've covered the body, a lot of really serious physical risks. Now let's transition to the consequences for the mind, the psychological and mental health issues. These often prove to be more insidious and way more challenging to treat than the immediate physical hangover.
Absolutely. The material points out the exacerbation of disorders, and this is such a vicious cycle. Substance abuse doesn't happen in a mental health vacuum. It can worsen or contribute to existing mental health disorders.
We're talking about a really significant spectrum of severe issues here. The list includes depression, anxiety, psychosis, and addiction.
It's a trap. People initially use drugs to self-medicate or numb their existing distress. Maybe it's social anxiety, maybe it's underlying depression.
And for a moment, it feels like it's working.
It feels like it's working, but the chemical impact of the substance then actively deepens the neurological and psychological hole that they're in.
The connection to psychosis is particularly important here, I think. It's not just temporary paranoia we're talking about.
No, not at all. For someone with an underlying predisposition, heavy substance use can trigger the onset of chronic conditions like schizophrenia, maybe years earlier than it might have otherwise appeared.
Or, what's more common is it can induce an acute drug-induced psychosis.
Right, which is characterized by delusions, paranoia, hallucinations. It requires immediate medical intervention and can be incredibly psychologically scarring.
And the most immediate psychological risk, right there in the party environment, is the increased vulnerability that Nathan experienced. We need to stress that impaired cognitive functioning makes individuals more susceptible to manipulation, coercion, or sexual assault.
This is such a critical point. It needs all the airtime we can give it. When your ability to assess risk, to interpret social cues, and to physically defend yourself is compromised, and all of those functions are impaired by most illicit substances, you lose your fundamental defense mechanism.
You're a target.
You become a target. People who intend to do harm often look for those who are visibly impaired. That temporary high, as seductive as it might feel in the moment, is never, ever worth the permanent emotional, physical, and legal damage that vulnerability can invite.
It's a stark truth. And those consequences, they often don't stop when the sun comes up. Let's look at the third category, one that is often the most overlooked: the legal and professional consequences, the implications for your future that can follow you for decades.
We have to start with criminal liability. This is the most immediate threat once law enforcement gets involved. Possessing, using, or distributing illicit drugs is illegal pretty much everywhere, resulting in arrests, criminal charges, fines, and potential imprisonment.
And the severity of that, it depends heavily on where you are and what the substance is, of course.
Of course.
Possession of even a small amount can be a misdemeanor, but that is still a stain on your record. If you're caught with a certain quantity, or if there's any indication of intent to distribute, even just sharing with your friends, that can spiral immediately into felony charges.
And this isn't just a fine you pay and forget about. A criminal record, especially a drug-related felony, can follow someone for decades. It can impact nearly every aspect of their civic and professional life.
Like what?
Well, think about housing applications, eligibility for certain government jobs, and crucially for a lot of young people, student aid.
You bring up student aid, which leads us directly into academic and career damage. This is the long-term impact on your reputation and your prospects. The text states that involvement with drugs at parties can result in immediate disciplinary actions, expulsion, academic probation.
And that disciplinary action, it often shows up on background checks or when you're applying for grad school or other advanced degrees.
But let's go deeper into the career damage.
Okay. If you're aiming for a field that requires a security clearance like finance, government, defense, any history of illicit drug use, even without a conviction, can be grounds for rejection.
Wow.
And furthermore, professional licensing boards for doctors, nurses, lawyers, teachers, they have incredibly low tolerance for substance abuse issues. They often require lengthy, expensive, and public remediation programs just to keep your license.
That is a life-altering consequence.
Yeah.
All stemming from a single decision in a dark warehouse.
Yeah.
It fundamentally damages the perception of your reliability.
That's the core of it. If your behavior suggests you prioritize temporary gratification over responsibility, it's going to close professional doors permanently.
And that erosion of perception connects perfectly to our final risk category, the psychological and social risks. What happens to your core relationships and your overall satisfaction with life?
This is the quiet damage, the stuff that just chips away at your ability to connect authentically with other people.
Let's discuss relationship strain. The ripple effect of substance abuse is extensive. It leads to conflicts, broken trust, and severe strain on relationships with family, friends, romantic partners, everyone.
When substance abuse becomes central to someone's life, their behavior changes dramatically. They become emotionally unreliable, their priorities shift completely, and trust just erodes. The material is very specific here. Changes in behavior, erratic decision-making, and a lack of reliability can disrupt meaningful connections and erode the foundation of healthy relationships.
And once that foundation of trust is broken, especially by lying or just being emotionally absent because of substance use, it is incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, to fully repair.
You become, quite simply, an unreliable factor in the lives of the people who care about you. And that alters the dynamic of every single relationship you have.
And finally, we have to challenge the central lie of that temporary euphoria, which is the decreased life satisfaction in the long run. People chase the high expecting it to bring lasting happiness, but they often achieve the exact opposite.
That's right. The material is blunt. While drug use may provide a temporary high or altered experiences, it often leads to negative consequences that ultimately diminish overall life satisfaction.
Think of it as an opportunity cost.
A huge opportunity cost. The time, the money, the emotional energy that's dedicated to seeking substances and then recovering or dealing with the legal fallout, those are hours and resources that are stolen from personal growth, from career development, from building meaningful relationships.
The combination of all these things, the physical and mental health problems, the strained relationships, the legal complications, it fundamentally hinders personal growth, fulfillment, and overall well-being.
Nathan's story is the perfect illustration of that. He realized the price he paid was far, far too high for the momentary feeling he got.
Okay, so we've laid out the comprehensive, multi-layered risks. Now let's pivot entirely and equip our listeners with actionable, practical knowledge. This next part is all about promoting responsible behavior and harm reduction strategies.
Yes, these are the tools for mitigation and safety that can genuinely save lives.
We have to begin with the primacy of personal safety. That has to be the guiding principle.
It does. We have to reiterate the importance of prioritizing your own personal safety and making informed decisions about substance use. It means knowing your limits, understanding the risks, and always, always having a plan B.
Absolutely. Then we move to encouraging open dialogue and providing resources. It's kind of a two-pronged approach. First, we need to advocate for robust education on the dangers. But second, and this is just as important, we have to provide viable, exciting alternatives to drug-centric party scenes.
Right. If people only see one path to social fun, they're going to default to it.
Exactly.
And this is where the philosophy of harm reduction really comes in. This approach recognizes that, regardless of prevention efforts, some people will still make choices to use substances.
So we have to deal with that reality.
We have to. Therefore, we must support access to resources that are designed to mitigate the most negative outcomes. The material specifically lists some powerful proven tools here.
Yeah, let's detail those life-saving tools. It lists two very practical resources. Drug testing kits, or naloxone, aka Narcan. This is about reducing potential harm, regardless of anyone's personal choice to use or not use.
Let's elaborate on those, because understanding how they work is crucial. Drug testing kits, they're often simple reagent tests, allow a person to place a tiny sample of a substance onto a chemical compound to see how it reacts.
And that reaction tells you what might be in it.
It suggests the presence of dangerous adulterants, especially something like fentanyl. Now, it's not a definitive safety guarantee, but it is a critical piece of information that promotes an informed choice. Having that knowledge can absolutely deter someone from consuming a lethal dose.
And naloxone, or Narcan, that is maybe the single most important tool in the fight against overdose deaths right now.
It is. It's a medication that rapidly reverses the effects of an opioid overdose. It's now widely available over the counter or through community programs because rapid administration is so essential.
So if somebody's showing signs of respiratory depression,
You can help. Having naloxone on hand and knowing how to use it, which is typically just a simple nasal spray, it can be the difference between life and death while you're waiting for emergency services to arrive.
it's about empowering people to protect each other.
It is. Which brings us to promoting responsible behavior. This isn't just about individual choice, it's about communal responsibility. We need to emphasize prioritizing well-being over temporary thrills.
And that means detailing practical steps that are easy to use in a chaotic environment. We strongly encourage moderation if substances are going to be consumed.
Yes.
But most importantly, it means actively looking out for your friends, having a buddy system, and setting clear personal boundaries before you even walk into the venue.
That social contract is so vital, you know. It means agreeing that if one of you says, "I'm done," the other person respects that and helps you leave or find a safe space.
Right.
Knowing your limit, making sure your friends respect it, and having a prearranged exit strategy is a massive step in harm reduction. And never, ever leave an intoxicated or impaired friend alone.
And finally, let's look at the organizational side of this, creating safe party environments. The responsibility doesn't just lie with the people attending, it lies heavily with the party organizers and promoters too.
Organizers have a moral and often a legal duty to ensure attendee safety and security. This absolutely includes having clearly visible, trained security personnel, controlling access, and monitoring guest lists to keep out unwanted or predatory elements.
A safer environment is a more controlled, monitored, and accountable one.
Totally. And they also need to provide safe alternatives that are easy to get and appealing. That means offering good non-alcoholic drink options and not just, tap water, and promoting responsible drinking practices for those who do choose to consume alcohol.
If the only readily available options are highly intoxicating, the atmosphere will inevitably lean toward high risk.
Of course it will. Creating a culture that values moderation, consent, and safety is a responsibility shared by everyone. But organizers set the tone by what they offer and what standards they enforce. It's about ensuring that fun and celebration can truly coexist with well-being, just like Nathan eventually found in his advocacy work.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean, really? The core lesson here, driven home so powerfully by Nathan's journey and all the risks we've outlined, is it's simple, but it's profound. The pursuit of pleasure, that chase for escapism, it must not come at the devastating expense of your long-term health and your future.
It can't. Making informed decisions, armed with the knowledge of how these things work and what the consequences are, is absolutely essential. Every single time you step into that environment.
It truly is. And understanding that journey of introspection, of grasping the potential for addiction, the specific impact on mental health, like induced psychosis or chronic anxiety, and the erosion of your relationships, that detailed knowledge is your power. It's what allows you to protect your opportunity to build a long-term fulfilled life rather than one that's dictated by regret or addiction.
Absolutely. And as we close out, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked extensively about the strain on relationships and future prospects that substance use can inflict.
That's right. So, given the documented and often permanent damage to long-term trust and professional opportunities, how should individuals proactively and concretely communicate their boundaries regarding substance use with their social circles to preserve that long-term trust and maintain their professional standing?
It's a hard conversation for sure, but it's one that needs to happen proactively.
It does. We want to hear what you think about that complex question. Please share your opinions and experiences in the comments section below. We read all of them, and they genuinely fuel our future analysis and research.
Your stories and your perspectives, they help us build a clearer, more nuanced picture for everyone in this space.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Party Animal Podcast. Make sure to check back in for future episodes, and please click that like button, turn on notifications, and subscribe to help this podcast bring more awareness to others while enjoying an amazing time minus the pitfalls.
Be safe out there.